business is a standard motions. It's a minutes of August 21st. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Been a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion, corrections, or additions to those minutes? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried, minutes approved. On the regular agenda, the first item is a rezone petition. To consider a rezoning petition from agricultural to general industrial. The site is generally located in the southwest quarter of Section 6, Township 139 North, Range 95 West. The site is approximately 25 acres. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Good morning. Sean Sorn, Boundary Engineering, representing the property owner. This is approximately 25 acres out on the east side of town, directly south of the new Public Works facility. It is currently zoned agricultural, and the owner's looking to take this to general industrial. It does match the comprehensive plan for the city of Dickinson. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Mr. Chairman, since it's on my land, I think we better sit this one out.
Thank you. Mr. Tews has an interest in this, so he will not be participating in the conversation here. Any questions for Mr. Soren?
Does the owner own more land in that section?
I don't believe in that section. Across the road to the west, they own some, and then southwest of there. This would be the remainder of the parcel that the owner purchased and sold part of it to the city. So this is the remaining piece.
I only ask because, you know, I think this request is great. And it is a natural place for industrial expansion, I think, out here. But as we plat, we might want to look a little bit at the grounds around it to make sure everything makes sense. That'd be easier if the owner owned it all, I guess, but at least to take a look at that. But otherwise, I think it's a good request.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Soren. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone on the commission wish to make further comment while the public hearing is still open? Mr. Curtan, what is the recommendation of the city on this? Do we have a comment from you?
The city supports it. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan. We have noted a condition of approval of it. The condition of approval is brought forth because we need to ensure that the parcel was created properly. So if they could provide evidence that it was created prior to our current subdivision regulations that were adopted back in 2012, then they won't need to plat before they can get any building permits. If they cannot prove that point, then at that point they'll need to come back and subdivide the property before any building permits can be issued. And that was recommended as part of the condition of approval of the rezone.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. Any other comments? This time then we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kovash.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Dickinson Energy Park LLC rezoning petition from AG to GI, subject to the condition listed above as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Second by Mr. Hanson. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I understand the comment about platting. Is it the intent to plat?
They may not. I could refer to the reason for the condition. Based upon the documentation, I see a survey that was done in 2012. If the property was segregated in 2012, depending on the time that it was done, it may have been an illegal segregation. Or at least the survey is showing, all it is a survey. It's not a transfer of the title. And I just want to make sure that it met our subdivision regs, because after I think September of 2012, when we changed our subdivision regs, any property that's less than 40 acres, and this is 20 acres if I recall right, they're required to plat, irrespective if they have road access to that. Prior to that, if they were greater than 5 acres and had access and they were not providing an additional road, then they were exempt from our subdivision regulation. So that's the reason I put the condition down there, just so they should be aware of it. So if the property ever transfers, that future owner will know, okay, I need to come back and plat it before I can get any building permits.
Currently, I'm not aware of any plans to plat it. I don't know that the owner would be opposed to that. As far as September 2012, I believe the city took ownership of the north 25 acres prior to that, which means this would have been created prior to that adoption. But we can certainly verify those dates if need be.
It just seems to me that regardless, it should be platted, even if it's one tract.
Well, if it's exempt from the subdivision regulations when it was created, then all they're doing is coming back with the rezoning of the property that they own. They were able to segregate the property, and I presume that this property was segregated as part of the public works and the rest. And if that's the case, then that was a legal segregation, and all they're doing is coming back and rezoning the property. There is no requirement for them to plat unless they want to, subsequent to this application, come back and plat.
Thank you for clarification, Mr. Soren. And Mr. Corton, any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Rezone petition recommended. The second item on our regular agenda is a rezone petition. It's to consider an amendment to the existing Pinecrest Commons PUD, labeled 2013-01, with several modifications. The site is located south of 35th Street Southwest and north of 15th Street. And at this time, I'd ask the party presenting.
Brian Bachman with the Meyer Real Estate Group. After meeting with Ed about some of the issues that we've had with this site, getting our development agreement done and everything else, we wanted to come back in, do some housekeeping for the R3 that we have in this area, and also just kind of walk you through with some of the other changes where our final plat will be coming in the next week, so that we can hopefully get that on the December agenda, but just kind of wanted to get you guys up to speed with what's going on out in Pinecrest. So you've got the color map there. Basically what you're going to see is the red area on the bottom, which borders 15th and 30th, will be kind of our retail area. The green area just north of that is Doug Decker's property. The blue area up north of that will be more of a retail with commercial use. That will have some office space and some retail pads out in front. The kind of mustard colored one in the back is where we have our multifamily. You'll see apartment units, 12 plexes, small area where we've got some townhomes planned, and then an area to the north there that we're calling some senior area that will have different forms of senior housing in, from single-family to duplexes, townhomes, and probably some income-assisted senior living areas up there. The plan for early next year would be to get started in the red, the blue, and the multifamily areas, as well as the area to the north, which isn't shown on this map, which is where Westwood Court is. I'd be happy to answer any questions for you if you have any.
Any questions?
Yeah, I do. So the property, that's a multifamily unit with the pump jack and is that the inside circle?
That's a retaining pond that goes around where the oil well is.
Oh, okay. And then the outside circle is the 300.
Yep, exactly.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I had another question, just for clarification. On the packet, it showed the water tower site adjacent to and south of 35th Street or 21st Street.
Right.
On Dickinson addressing. And on the colored map that you just provided, the water tower lot is a little bit south. Which one?
They
goes
had,
with the current?
from what I'm understanding, my engineer had been talking with Bill, and they wanted to move it up because just the height difference there. I think we picked up some ground height there.
My only comment then would be to provide an access easement.
Road through there. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Kubas. That is our city engineer, Craig Kupas, for those people who haven't met him yet. He's first time here today, right?
First time? On this
Well,
side?
on that side of the bench, yeah. Thank you.
And then just for purposes of that, the other items that were in that packet were just an architectural rendering of what some of the retail areas will look like, as well as some examples of some of the office buildings and so on that we're planning on building out in the area.
The roads you have depicted in there, how the interior roads, are they pretty much going to be like that?
Yes.
That intersection on the non-labeled road that comes down on the west side, comes down and curves toward the center,
Mm-hmm.
where that meets that road coming from the east, is that an acceptable intersection?
As far as we know, it's very similar to what was in our preliminary plat. There isn't a lot of changes to the road system. That road that comes in off of 30th is new, but no, that should work for as far as traffic and turning radiuses.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come to the podium and let us hear your views.
Ed, within the confines of the PUD, couldn't we write some buffering in to leave some of these pine trees and some of these pine rows, since it is Pinecrest?
You can, if that's what you want to do, as part of the modification to the PUD. There are requirements that they have to do it around the Decker property, the one that's in the green, around the perimeter of that. It depends on where you want to go. What area are you referring to?
I'm referring to exception A, which now is the Dvorak property.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see that buffered because that was an issue. I mean, it has been an issue, and if that east side could be buffered by those tree rows, they're already there.
Those aren't coming out. If you look on there, you'll see the little area
So
there.
you wouldn't take exception to having
No.
that written in?
And most of the trees in the area, in the blue area, we're going to try to leave. The area in the red, we're going to have to take out a good chunk of those. We've had a group come down where they think we can move some of those trees up to 14 inches. So we're going to try to take some of them down and move some of them to go around pump jacks and other things like that. So we're going to remove as many of them as we can.
Thank you.
Mr. Bachman, I just want to note, we've talked about the ones in the red and some modifications with respect to our overlay because we're trying to push the parking lots away from the view and have the buildings up front. The area in blue we have not discussed, and that one there the buildings need to be close to the road.
Nope.
With the landscape strip in there.
Nope, that's fine.
Okay.
Brian, I'm sorry, on the number 3, your movement of the school parcel location, can you describe what's intended and planned for that area to the west?
It's not shown on the color version. On the one that Ed set out to you guys in your packets, it'll show a little better on where the school site goes. The school site goes a little west of just west of the entrance that comes in off of 21st or 35th. Put it down in a little bit more of a residential area so it had a little bit quieter neighborhood around it rather than having all the commercial and retail around the school.
Okay, so right up against Exception A property, you're moving that to senior housing and moving the school property down to the...
To the west, yep.
Okay.
Point of clarification I want everybody to be aware of, it's, their proposal is senior housing. That doesn't mean it comes to fruition.
Right.
It's, so I felt comfortable with the civic designation that we have in our zoning code. It's very limited on the land uses that you can do. So don't base your decision strictly on a senior housing because it may not come to fruition.
Could you just refresh us what would be allowed in the civic?
Civic can have some commercial, but it's not going to have outside storage. It's going to be your medical offices, dental offices. You could have civic, you could have schools, daycares, things that are generally depicted for civic and personal use. Those are your typical ones for that. I don't have my zoning code, so I can't go through that in detail, but that's pretty much it. The biggest issues that people complain about are the intensity issues and the outside storage, and the noise generating ones, and the civic would not include those.
Brian, one more. And I could be wrong, but just for clarification, when we talk about school property, I believe we're talking about park property.
It's park property, correct.
It's not school property at this point.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's what we've given as a park designation, and the school board has discussed that with the park board, right?
Do you have any other information or views on that? What, so the public can know is there a deal?
I really don't.
Okay.
I think the school board is kind of up in the air as to where they want to go to, so.
Is that right, Mr. Allen? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Brockman, the layout that we have in our packet is quite a bit different than this colored one you've given us as far as street layout. Which one should we be paying more
You're looking
attention-
at the last page of the packet that he gave you. The first page is the original plat, and then we just took you through, so the page 3 of 3 of the Pinecrest submittal.
Okay, I'm looking at a drawing that's entitled PUD Amendment Submittal Proposed Site Plan.
Right. Are you looking at page 3 of 3?
That's the same, yeah.
I don't,
You know, the street layout is, like I say, significantly different than what your colored drawing shows here.
So with respect to the one that you're referring to on page 2, sheet 2 of 3, the color sheet that Brian is providing for us is only a portion of the overall. It would only be from this road on.
I understand. Yeah, I understand that, but the streets in the southeast corner, for example, are significantly different.
Mhm.
Northeast corner,
But we have not, like I mentioned in the staff report, this is land use, they're depicting streets. They have not been approved this way. That will be done at the final plat stage by engineering. So I'm not necessarily worried if it's a little off on there. It's a general depiction with respect to that. When they submit their final plat, we will go through the streets and make sure that it works with respect to that.
Correct.
any other questions or comments for Mr. Bachman? Thank you.
I guess just one
Mr.
thing,
Coos.
Brian. I know that Mr. Dvorak's in the audience, and he owns that property. I guess I'd be a little concerned or want to hear more of moving the school property down the road. And if he has any concerns, because I think that's a big change. That's moving quite a distance. And if it's designated park, if it was my property, I'd probably be pretty interested in keeping that park. So, I mean, it's up to him. He's the landowner, so, but that's my concern, Brian. Other than that, I think it's great.
Well, the biggest thing that we were trying to do was to get a middle school away from that, because we honestly felt that having some housing and such around there would be a better
Sure.
buffer for him than having a middle school there, so,
But-
absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this rezone. Please feel free to come forward to the podium and give us your views.
Good morning. My name's Terry Dvorak, and like Mr. Tools was saying, I did purchase the exemption property. And again, I apologize, I don't have the color maps. When you guys were talking colors, I'm just clarifying. You know, and I'm fine with everything. Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay, so this is a little different than what I have. But anyways, where the water tower is proposed, you know, I guess mainly, I know, and then you guys talked about the trees, but I just want to confirm that those trees are going to stay, that west edge of the trees are going to stay. I know Ed had made a comment there afterward that, you know, having the buildings away more so might affect that tree line, but, I mean, that's just a great buffer for my property. Just want to confirm that those trees are going to stay on that west edge of that commercial property.
For clarification, I will ask that Mr. Bachman and you understand you're talking about the same trees, and that Mr. Corton.
Okay, this is the map that Ed gave me.
My recommendation while they're discussing
Yeah.
would be that we require the trees along the property, along
So
the
this is going
eastern
to-
property line of exemption A to be
Because you
the
can see
existing
why
trees to
I'm
remain
showing.
as
If I look
depicted,
at your-
and I'll have that before it goes to City
Like,
Commission,
it does stop.
excluding the city-owned property for the water tank. I don't want to put a limitation on that one because the water tank is going to be based upon elevation, and we will
Okay.
keep as many trees as we can. So as long as we exclude the water tank site that'll be city-owned, or we're going to be putting a water storage facility, I'd be fine with that condition. And I think Mr. Bachman would be as well.
Yep.
So why don't you just modify that, add that as part of your motion if you like.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moore.
Terry? What's your feeling on, you know, as a park district, we haven't discussed it, moving it further away. What's your feeling on that?
You know, I kind of have mixed feelings at this point. I haven't given it enough thought to stand up here and give you guys some rebuttal on it. Again, those trees are my main concern at this point. I mean, I realize the city needs to grow. I realize things are changing. Would I like it to be open pasture? Absolutely. But I understand that, you know, they have spent a lot of money and things are going to progress and happen. But, I mean, I just hope they have communication with the landowners around there when you know, something does come up. You know, well, it's going to be a retirement area or dental property. You know, I hope that they have some communication and with us as landowners so we can work together and figure out something. But at this point, I just getting into it, I just purchased the property. So I'm coming in just with a few questions, and my main concern are those trees at this point. So I wish I could answer that better. I wish I'm just getting involved with this property. So hopefully they have some respect for us at this point, so as landowners. So yeah, thanks though.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Dvorak? Thank you. At this time, I'd ask anyone else who would like to make comment on this rezone, would feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make further comment on this?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Kovacs.
Mr. Cortana, if they're going to come with the final, at that time, we're probably gonna have to decide where the parkland is going to be, am I correct? Okay.
Any other comments? We'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Pinecrest Commons PUD amendment as meeting requirements of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, with the following additional requirement that the trees stay at the eastern edge of exception A, excluding the water tank property.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm. There's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second by Mr. Tews. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend. Thank you very much. Item 3 on our regular agenda is a rezone petition. It's to consider a rezoning petition from rural residential to a general commercial and general industrial. The site is generally located in the northwest quarter of Section 15, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. It's approximately 46 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering and Surveying, representing the owner of Great Lakes First Subdivision. This rezone was last presented to you at July 17th meeting. And that last rezone had included a residential buffer on the southern edge of this subdivision. That was at the request of staff, and it represented what was platted with the existing BK subdivision. At that meeting, we brought up the possibility of providing a landscaped berm as a buffer instead of that rural residential property, and that's what we're proposing with this rezone. This rezone shows removing that rural residential portion and extending the industrial lots into that area. However, with that, we would be providing an 8-foot-high landscape berm to buffer the residential lots of Krelichik subdivision. If you have any questions at this time, I'd be happy to address those.
Anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Schrank?
I do.
Mr. Grimm?
Hey, Andrew, so the berm that we're talking about is at that southwest, it's not detailed or anything.
Right, that will come on our plat. We're coming next with the preliminary plat, and it's shown on there as a conservation easement. There's a 50-foot right-of-way we're proposing on the south property line, and we provided an easement across, a 50-foot easement across that entire right-of-way. I'm not sure if you have the preliminary plat, but it is shown on that preliminary plat application that we had as well, so.
Any other questions, comments for Mr. Schrank?
Thank you.
Mr. Schrank. This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this rezone petition. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone from the commission wish to make further comment? Mr. Curtan, would you like to make comment on this and a recommendation?
Staff recommends approval contingent upon the 3 conditions that are outlined as part of the rezone petition, that the 8-foot landscape berm along the southern properties shall be designed and approved by the community development director. It shall be irrigated and maintained, and then also that it's contingent upon the rezoning for the subsequent preliminary plat that comes after this. That has to be approved. Based upon that, we're recommending approval.
Thank you very much. Close public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Great Lakes rezoning petition, subject to the 3 conditions listed above as meeting all the requirements of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Hanson. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend approved. Thank you, Mr. Schrank. Item 4 on our agenda is a preliminary plat. To consider a preliminary plat for the Great Lakes First Subdivision, the site is generally located in the northwest quarter of Section 15, Township 140 North, Range 96 West. The site is approximately 139 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Thank you. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering and Surveying. This preliminary plat is basically reflecting the changes we had just discussed on the rezoning. Again, this was platted back in July, and we are changing that to add that conservation easement on the southern edge that will include that 8-foot-high landscape berm. We have also made a couple changes to the right-of-way. The right-of-way used to extend across the entire southern property line, and we are making a change to keep that commercial and residential traffic separate. Lot 10 will be accessed by a hammerhead turnaround off an existing frontage road. And the conservation easement will actually not allow access to those industrial lots, so that'll keep that industrial traffic out of the residential traffic as well. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to address those at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Schrank at this time?
Schrank, can you tell us about the 3 tracks that are shown in the plat?
Yes, those will be for stormwater management. They're in the low areas of the site, and we'll be draining the site to those areas for stormwater management.
Okay, so tract 1, will tract 1 have access off of 32nd?
It won't actually have an approach. It will be accessible through an adjacent lot. If it needs to be, we can provide an access easement or something to that lot if we need to.
That's what I'm wondering, because I don't think you're going to want any access.
We won't want to put an approach that close, no, but we could provide an access easement to that lot if that's desired.
Yeah, I think it looks good.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Schrank.
Thank you.
Somebody ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this preliminary plat. Please feel free to come forward. Anyone on the commission wish to make further comment? Mr. Corton, would you like to make a recommendation on this?
Staff recommends approval contingent upon the 3 recommended conditions that are attached within the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. This time we'll close public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kovash.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary subdivision plat for the Great Lakes First Subdivision replat, subject to the conditions listed above as depicted in the application materials, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code, and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
A second by Mr. Tews. Any discussion?
Yeah, I do.
Mr. Graham.
So he mentioned 3 conditions. I'm not seeing conditions in that.
Page 3.
Oh, okay.
I think they want the transportation service.
Okay, I got you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Being no more discussion, I would ask all those in favor to signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommendation approved. Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Item 5 on our regular agenda is a preliminary plat. So consider a preliminary plat for the Come and Go Addition subdivision. The site is composed of Lot 9, Block 4, the Calishes subdivision, as well as a portion of the west half of the southwest quarter of Section 2, Township 139 North, Range 96 West. The site's approximately 5.4 acres. This time I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Good morning, Jeremy Shepard, Olson Associates, the engineer on the project. Nick Hatfield from Come and Go could not be in attendance today. This project before you is a fairly simple lot split as part of the rezoning approval that this board reviewed a while back. The Come and Go will be developed on the southern lot, and the north lot will remain zoned R1. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this time?
Mr. Chairman, as I've just come on board, just recently I've had a chance to review the plat, and two issues come to mind involving public right-of-way. One of it on the north side of the plat, there is First Street East is dedicated for just a short distance off of 10th Avenue East, and then it dead ends there. I'd like to look a little closer at that to make sure we don't want to extend First Avenue East right away through this plat. There's also another dead-end street, Baker Avenue, which is about 800 feet east of 10th Avenue East. So we have two dead-end streets right now, and if we don't make provisions for right-of-way here, those two dead-end streets will remain dead-end streets. So I'd like to look at that a little closer with Mr. Shepard. And then on the south side of the property, adjacent to DOT right-of-way, I think the DOT has some plans for future improvements to the business loop, and I just want to make sure that any plans that would require additional right-of-way, would be accommodated with this plat. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Kumas.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Jackson.
the only other thing I'd bring up, we all know how difficult ingress and egress onto the business loop can be. It is on 10th Avenue East, and it is all the way along there. I don't know how much we can do about that, but I think we need to ask our engineering staff to take a look at that too, to make sure that access point is in the right location, that there's not conflict with what's across the road, across the south side of Highway 10, that in as much as possible, site distances are taken into consideration. Just something to take a look at, I think, before the final plat. And I suppose that's part of the building permit application, really, to look at that.
With respect to your question, Commissioner Jackson, yes. Condition 3, I'm going to modify that just to say access instead of road design and configuration to address that issue. We've let them know that the access point may need to be changed whenever they do submit their building permit for it. That's done at the building permit stage. Nevertheless, we have that addressed as condition number 3.
And I will tell you, I bought a little gas at Come and Go yesterday, and the staff is really anxious, really anxious.
That sounds good. Any other comments or questions at this time for Mr. Shepard? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who would like to make comment on this preliminary plat. Please feel free to come to the podium, and we'd be glad to hear your views. Any other comments from any of the commissioners? Mr. Corton, comment from you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we recommend approval. As noted in the staff report, we have 7 conditions. I mentioned a little bit earlier that condition 3 should be modified just for clarification purposes. I'll just read that just so it'll be accurately depicted. Prior to final plat approval, the interior and perimeter access, not road design and configuration, because we're talking about access issue, shall be approved to the satisfaction of the city engineer, and then based upon our contract city engineer, we'll add an additional condition that prior to final plat submittal, the city engineer shall determine if right-of-way dedication is necessary, and if so, the required width from the center line for the property for the extension of First Street, and then also along the business loop in 10th Avenue as well. So we just need to look at that a little bit more in detail. And the key on that is the condition is prior to final plat submittal, so the applicant will need to work with our city engineer to make that determination.
Thank you, Mr. Corton. This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hanson.
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the Come and Go Addition subdivision preliminary plot as depicted in Exhibit A, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Is there a second to that motion? Thank you, Mr. Kovacs, second by Mr. Kovacs. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, recommend. Thank you very much. Item 6 on our regular agenda is a special use permit application. It's to consider a request for a special use permit for off-street parking. The site is located at 114, it's 4th Avenue West on Lot 8, Block E of the Dakota Land and Colonization Company subdivision. The site is zoned high-density residential and is approximately .16 acre. At this time, I'd ask the party presenting, please feel free to come forward.
Morning again. Again, my name is Terry Dvorak, and I'm representing Charbonneau Car Center. I guess it's no mystery. We are short of parking in that whole area, just next to the schools, and just being downtown general, we're short on parking. So the property came up for sale. We had been visiting with the neighbors around that area, and we've been talking about this for quite some time. And then again, the property came up for sale. So we are presenting a parking lot. And again, the parking lot would only be for customers and employees. There would be nothing for sale in that parking lot. It would just, again, be for customers and employees. So we'd be able to put around 18 to 16 units, just depending on how we lay it out. The way we have it laid out on the map that you have in front of you is 16 spots. We're going to put some greenery on the west side, and we're going to also put a fence next to Mrs. Roberts' property, which is just north of us. And also, I've been in communication with the school because there are times, you know, they have a morning recess and an afternoon recess, and then, of course, noon. We're going to put a fence along that east, or would be the west edge of their property, just to protect balls from rolling over, and just so the kids are aware of that there's traffic there. The reason we had alley access there is because of in that morning drop-off time and the afternoon pickup time, 4th Avenue gets to be where there is no movement at all. I mean, that whole street gets between buses and parents picking up their kids. To access that parking lot you wouldn't be able to do it, because people pretty much park right on the street and they wait for their child to either get out or, you know, run in and get picked up. So that's why we kept the, and there's an existing LE there anyway, so we thought that would be a good entrance and exit point for that parking lot. So, do you guys have any questions on? I did, I don't know if you have a letter with, from Mrs. Roberts there. She is okay with the property as far as a parking lot, and I hope it works out. Again, to eliminate 16 to 18 vehicles off of that corner or off of that street would be, would work out really well for us.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Dvorak.
Mr. Gorton?
Have you read the conditions of approval, Terry?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so you're
Yep.
familiar with
Yep.
that?
Yep.
The city code requires that I understand the issue on the alley, but the primary access needs to be off 4th. I
Okay.
understand there may be some conflicts with that, and there may be a way you can move your operation to mitigate that, but that needs to be your primary access point.
Okay. Does that eliminate? Can there still be an access point?
You can
from
still have
the
access point
alternative?
off the alley,
Okay.
but that needs to be your primary point for
Okay.
that. Because we're talking about the public, and the public needs to have it off of
Okay.
the city-approved road.
All right.
Other than that, as long as you're, you know, it's the biggest thing for staff is this is a further encroachment in an area that's been residential. As long as the neighbors around it are happy and satisfied with that, I'm not going to have an objection to that. So I'm waiting on public testimony.
Mr. Dvorak, have you had comments from your other parking lot? Or have you even sought comments about how that's working out?
You know, it's all been pretty positive. There's been a couple issues just with some of the rebuttal that we had from the current homeowners around the area that, they still wish it would have been a house. Again, going back to the condition of what that house was, there was just no way to rebuild it without starting from scratch. So, but 90% of everyone that's involved with that area has been nothing but positive. So,
And the fences on this new parking lot are, how would they compare to what's on the other one you did?
they're going to tie in similar to what we use. It's the exact same fence that is on our existing property, which is located west. So that will all tie in together.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
my own, I mean, this seems to make sense to me. My only concern was that playground. So Mr. Croton talked about access off the street also, but either way, you'll build that fence on the
Yep.
playground?
Yes, like I said, I've been in communication with the school and not exactly sure on how high or what they want. We just agreed that we would build it for them, and at this point, we're open on what they want, so.
Any other comments? Questions? Thank you, Mr. Vark.
Thank you.
This time I'd ask if there's anyone in the public who'd like to make comment on this special use permit. Please feel free to come forward. I'd like to hear your comments. Any other comments from the commission? Mr.
I'll
Toots?
just make one comment. Everything that Charbonneau's has done down there, we've always had a lot of public input, and this, to have no public input this time must prove that they're doing it right, that they're happy, and they really have cleaned it up down there, so.
You saying it was dirty?
No, I'm not saying it was dirty. Don Charbonneau would be here.
Well, I think that Mr. Dvorak wants to give those people the same consideration that he referred to on his property that he's looking at out where the trees are also. So I do believe there's a real genuine concern here for the neighbors. This time we'll close the public portion of this hearing. I believe Mr. Cortana has already given us a recommendation.
Yes, I provided a recommendation, Mr. Chairman. I would just add that prior to certificate of occupancy in Condition 8, that a fence shall be erected on the property to the east through the extremities of the site, basically flush with the property that we're talking about today at a minimum, just so it's there, so that we catch it, so that the fence is taken care of at the time that the operation starts, so that the issue with the school district or with the Catholic school is resolved. I think that's only fair.
Mr. Corton, you might have misspoke, but is there a certificate of occupancy on a parking lot?
They're actually doing a building. This is going to be a building. That was my understanding. If
No,
not,
it's just
if
a
not,
parking
then
lot.
prior to operations. Okay,
He's just putting a parking lot in and a fence for employee parking.
okay.
Nothing to be
I haven't been involved in this project that much. Other than that, the idea was to work it out so that the Catholic school to the east would mitigate that site. As long as that is taken care of prior to operations, then I would be fine with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jackson?
and I'm saying this without thinking it through very much, but when you think about the history of that alley and the use that it's had for many, many years, I find myself wondering if it shouldn't be vacated between Charbonneau and the school. There may be utilities in there that you'd have to keep an easement or something, but
I agree with you, Mr. Jackson. I think that should be a private access easement for St. Pat's and for Charbonneau Car Center. And that would
right now the city
give
has
them some control over that alley.
right
even
now
if
the city
there
has
is-
responsibility to maintain the alley.
Even if there
I-
is utility easements in there, I think.
Not something we have to
School.
pursue today, but maybe staff can just take a look at that? And
No, I think that's a valid question. We could have engineering and public works look at it and provide us with a recommendation. It makes sense to me. I mean, if it could be vacated so that it is not to be interpreted as an access, going through that property. And in my understanding, it's not during the hours of the church operation. I think it's blocked even during the other time. At least on the northern end, they have a gate there. So in essence, it's been de facto removed as an access point. So why not go through the process of vacating it? So we could look at that and bring it to the city commission, and ultimately make a decision on that.
you may have concerns from Public Works and your fire chief about that. I don't know, but
Mr. Corton, if we're gonna look at that, I'd like to look at getting it vacated all the way down to the north LA access way to M&H, because Charbonneau's controls all that area. Has it been vacated, Terry? Okay.
We'll take a look at that whole area, and I'll leave it up to Mr. Kubitz to look at that and work with our public works and fire. And if it makes sense as a city side of it, we'll bring forward that. If it doesn't, then we will not. If that's a direction that the commission would like staff to take a look at.
I think it's very a good thing to look at because it could facilitate those two major property owners quite well.
This is Robert still needs access to her garage. There's still, hopefully down the road, this will be great.
Thank you, Mr. Navarre. This time we'll close public portion of this hearing, and I'd ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Tooze?
I would make a recommendation or motion to approve the special use permit as noted with the conditions noted on the fencing on the north side for Charbonneau's request.
Thank you. Is there a second? I'll second. Then a motion, a second. Any discussion? I have a question on, as far as discussion, the greenery that was mentioned. Is that defined? Is there a definition of that as far as what that will be?
Now to talk about that, you can just put in there if you want to as a general condition for the landscaping to be approved by the community development director if you want to do it that way, and I'll work with Mr. Dvorak on that. If you want to add that to it, that's fine.
That is acceptable.
Okay. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Recommend to approve. Thank you, Mr. Dvorak. Anyone have anything else they would like to bring before the commission at this point? Being none, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion to adjourn is a second. All those in favor? Aye. Oh. Meeting adjourned.